Welcome, EQX friends and fans. Welcome to 9-Pin Cider. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Keller from EQX. We've got our staff here. Jeff is back there, too. Hello, Jeff. Hi there. How are you? Welcome to the EQX sessions presented by Bentley Seeds out of Cambridge, New York, an incredible family-run business for 50-plus years that we love working with all these businesses, just like 9-Pin Cider here in the tasting room, to make all these events come to life. We really appreciate that. And first off, thank you to everybody who got here somehow at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday. I don't know how everybody maneuvered their schedules. We know that's not always easy. However you stretch the truth with your employer or your life and you got here, we don't want to know, but we say thank you. We've long supported and loved what Craig Finn does, his work with the Hold Steady, his solo work, always been. That album just came out last month. An incredible songwriter and storyteller and singer and all-around traveling entertainer. We're very honored to have him today. And when he starts, we're going to do some music. And then, before everybody gets out of here, see the I Love Albany sign over there. We would just love to get everybody in just a fun group shot for us, just to remember this. So when Craig is completed with his set, please hang out or come over there. So let's do it. You guys ready for Craig? All right.
So I always think like it's good to have a showbiz thing where you tie it all together. And this record I just made, Always Been. I was thinking about it as I drove into town last night, and I made it produced by Adam Grandisiel from the band War on Drugs, and he did a great job. But people have asked me whenever I've been doing interviews about this record, how did you meet Adam? Where does it go back to? I said, well, we brought the War on Drugs on their, I believe, their first U.S. tour, my band, The Hold Steady, in 2009. And so I guess I met him at the first show we played together. And then I thought, that show was at Valentine's in Albany. So this record maybe has its origins in Albany. And this is the first song. In the later afternoon, it sort of softens on the avenue, wasting the remainder of the day. Drinking off what's left of the glasses on the table, when the couples get their checks and walk away. And I'll be here tomorrow and then every day that follows, till I see you later on this week. Will you come and pick me up when I get up off the bus? Will you help me bring my stuff out to the beach? When we met, I was the reverend. You were in the congregation. Didn't happen right away, but pretty soon. And I never had a calling, I just had a strong desire to be the one that stood up in the room. When I was a child, I used to fixate on the chaplain, the way he brought the widows all to tears. That looked like a decent way to make a little living here. Gave myself to God for a few years. I built a chapel off the exit on the highway outside Harrisburg. There was all that new development back then. Parishioners would come to me with cakes and little pastries, asked me for my blessing once again. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I was faking all the faithfulness, and every single sermon was a fraud. Drifted through the rituals, prideful, high and pitiful, pissing off a petty, vengeful God. Pissing off a petty, vengeful God. Parents are both ancient now. I'm staying at their summer house, clear out on the weekends when they come. To my sisters with her daughter on the fringe of Philadelphia, with their skinny cigarettes and snapping gum. But I'm grateful for the place to stay. I'm caddying on Saturdays. The money's not as good as it was when we were teenagers. Walk back from the golf course, cut through a couple backyards, try to keep my eyes pointed heavenward. In another prior life, a reverend and his wife were sitting in the kitchen making plans, unaware of all the mess, the pressure in the flesh is capable of making in a man. And I never really fell, 'cause I was never quite convinced. But I must admit I miss all the simplicity of a woman and a man. Though they also understand the reasons you no longer want to be with me. I can see why you no longer want to be with me. Someone called the cops. I explained to them how much it is you mean to me. The cuffs, they made a click as they wrapped around my wrists. Everybody's got some version of security. Somewhere there's a life where the Reverend has his wife. Jesus has his ministry in Galilee. But this sunset looks like blood from the windows of this bus. Somewhere between Harrisburg and Bethany. Somewhere between Harrisburg and Bethany. Somewhere between Harrisburg and Bethany. Thank you. That one's called Bethany. It's the first song on the album. I don't think I've ever written a song that was such a first. You know, we talked about meeting Adam here in Albany. I guess it goes back to that. But that song is really maybe the beginning of the record. I wrote that song, and it was about a character. It was about a guy who became a priest without having faith, without believing in God. And he built a life that was based on this lie, basically. And it went very well for a while, and then it went very poorly. And that song kind of finds him in the aftermath of all that. It was the first song I wrote for the record, and I sort of thought, this is a start of something. It ended up being the first song I showed to Adam. It was the first song we recorded, and of course, when we got to sequencing the record, it said, well, this should be first. But when I wrote that song, I said, that whole scene's kind of rich. Maybe I could write some more songs about that very same guy. And so I started writing more songs about that guy and about his situation and kind of putting a microscope on different aspects of what I already knew from that first song. And it became, I guess, somewhat of a concept record, although I don't like using the word concept record because concept records historically are always about a guy saving rock and roll. And this guy doesn't save rock and roll. And also, the other thing is that not every song on the record is about that guy or about that story. Most of them are, but then there's kind of these, like, what I'd call bottle episodes. And so I told my manager, I was explaining it to him. I'm like, 7 or 8 songs are about this guy, but there's a couple that just aren't. But maybe in that way, it's like a Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon. And he said, that doesn't sound very hip, Craig. Why don't you say it's like Pulp Fiction? So we'll say it's like Pulp Fiction, but it's really like both. There's a couple songs that dangle out there. But this next song is one of the ones that is about that guy, the priest, the former priest. And in this one, and this is one of the ones they've been playing on the radio, this one is about this guy talking to his ex-wife and explaining how much better he's doing now. And whether we believe him, that's up to the listener. But it's called People of Substance. Dana, I don't get depressed anymore, except possibly December at the Delaware shore. Maybe missing numbers on the motel doors, the toy section at this drugstore. Otherwise, I'm pretty much cured. I've been getting out of bed before noon now. Gonna find a new place pretty soon now. The whole thing's moving uptown. And I'm sorry about the way that I scared you. Sorry that I wasn't in touch since. Spent way too much time on people without any substance. I decided that I'm gonna push forward. I'm committed to making the change. But you gotta remember, I never go out in the rain. And it's been raining all day, and my jacket got nicked from the coat check. These curtains can't keep out the gray. These umbrellas that you get at the drugstore always blow the wrong way. Dana, I don't drink nearly as much, 1 or 2 nights a week at the most. I know I used to be such a monster. The city's still lousy with ghosts. So I'm sorry about that fight in the taxi. You know, that probably just wasn't my night. If you just agree to come see me, I could try to make it all right. I decided that I'm gonna back off now. I heard you turn that old boy into a husband, and you're out in the county hanging out with some people of substance. Oh, and Gina, I'm done with the breakdowns. But the winter's pretty weird here at the shore. You never really told me what it was you cut me off for, and I'm still not sure. So I decided that I'd call and just check in. If I was good enough for you back then, you shouldn't be ashamed to bring me around to your new friends. I've been asking around for some sort of system to trust in. But maybe you could put me in touch with some people of substance. I spend way too much time on people without any substance. I spend way too much time on people without any substance. So from there, I kept going, you know, and I kept thinking about really that first song and what details emerged from that. And there's a line in that first song, Bethany, about how he's staying mainly at his parents' house in the Delaware Shore on the off season because it's empty. But sometimes they come down and he has to go stay with his sister, with her daughter, on the fringe of Philadelphia, as it says in that first song. And I thought, well, what about that, you know? What about a song about that? Sort of a scene report from that house. And this is, you know, what he finds when he goes and hangs out up there. It's called Crumbs. My sister has a daughter, doesn't look much like her. Looks more like the father she won't see. She's mostly on her phone these days. She's got a couple friends her age, some secrets that she died to try to keep. When I'm staying in their guest room, I can hear her in the next room. Whispers in the silence and the sighs. She doesn't eat much breakfast, single slice of toast at most. Watches from the corners of her eyes. And there's crumbs around the corners of her mouth. You can hear the highway from their house. The traffic sounds like water in a river rushing south. We'll never win this war, but maybe we can wait it out. We'll never win this war, but maybe we can wait it out. Her mother is my sister. She's a fighter, but she's tired now. Third shift's such a bitch to decent sleep. On Sundays she puts perfume on and waltzes with the vacuum on, sucks up the destruction of the week. In the kitchen there's a radio, she sings along the one she knows, remembers back when some of these were new, when the girls all chose a guy from the dances at the Y. Felt like that was what you're supposed to do. Now all those choices seem a little grim, violent, wild, or disengaged and dim. The highway goes forever, but your funds will fence you in. Paying bills and stuffing out generic super slims. The years they put the yellow in our hair and teeth and skin. Her husband was a contractor, a hunter and a fly fisher. Never raised a hand, he just withdrew. So far inside his head that you would barely even notice him. A ghost that's usually in the other room. Eventually they started sleeping separately. Eventually it didn't even hurt. Last winter he moved out to his brother's house. Eventually he stopped going to work. Now she hasn't seen a check in 7 months. And they're living off of credit cards and crumbs. And she's pretty sure her daughter has been meeting up with boys. We'll never win this war, but maybe we won't get destroyed. She's wishing that that highway would make that goddamn noise. She doesn't really trust her daughter's friends, but she's happy that I'm helping out with rent. So we stay up late and talk about the way it was before. Can maybe wait it out, but we'll never win this war. We can maybe wait it out, but we'll never win this war. We can maybe wait it out, but we'll never win this war. We can maybe wait it out, but we'll never win this war. So I'm gonna go back to a record, and there's a song I liked. I really like this one, and I've written a lot of songs since I started writing songs about places I haven't been. And one thing that often happens is that I get invited there. So it's kind of a trick, or just the universe aligns, and I go there. And the only one it hasn't worked is there's a Hold Steady song about Modesto, California, and they haven't gotten me there, but it's called Modesto's Not That Sweet, so maybe it's not exactly an anthem for tourism. But I wrote this song about a guy who's, well, he's not just a guy, he's a legend. His name's the Amarillo Kid, and the thing about the Amarillo Kid is he's got that nickname, right? And you don't get that nickname if you stay in Amarillo. Everyone down there is the Amarillo Kid, you know? So he moved to Buffalo, New York, and that's where he became the Amarillo Kid. That's where he did the legendary things that made him a legend, you know? The funny thing about when I was really proud of the song when I wrote it, I started playing it for people, and people started to say, "Hey, Craig, down here in Texas, we say Amarillo." I said, "Yeah, I know. But up in Buffalo, New York, they say all kinds of crazy shit." Saved myself. But after I did this, I bought this car in Arizona, and I was driving it back to Brooklyn with a friend. It was a road trip, and I figured out we could go through Amarillo. And so we went there for an afternoon. We were driving around. It was kind of cool, and we went to the Amarillo Zoo. And then, like, a month later, there was this thing. I don't know if you saw it, but at the Amarillo Zoo, there was this weird creature that they found on their security cameras that was unidentifiable. And it looks like kind of like a coyote, but it stands on 2 feet. Anyways, it's really freaky, and you should check it out because I can't play the song without thinking about that. They never figured out what it is. But anyways, this is the Amarillo Kid. This is the legend of the Amarillo Kid, and he didn't stay in Buffalo either. So, spoiler alert. I was born down in the handle. I was brought up by the strap. When the devil starts to show up in your dreams, then it's hard to get your dreams back. If I lost my sense of wonder, you can blame it on the banks. When the scammers and the skimmers, they swim around together, and every dealer has a fish tank. The numbers never lie, but they also never tell the whole truth. Deanna's in the passenger side with the Buffalo Blues. She said the guys that you'll be meeting with won't be easily impressed. And if your whole thing's where you're coming from, I wonder why you left. I used to play first-person shooters. I'd spend days inside these games. Well, the speed made my head like a cockpit computer till the wings came off the plane. I was deep in debt and desperate. Met some Hesher and his henchmen. Put on my only suit and I walked up to the interview. I applied for the position. When the whole thing finally happened, they flew me out to Buffalo, New York. The terms were much different than what we'd first discussed. I was grateful for the work. Deanna was the girl that used to ride around and wait in the car. And the gig was pretty good. They just always need to know where you are. They gifted me a CRV and a decent place to live, a pistol and a nickname, the Amarillo Kid. Dispatch and deliver. It's tough to drive in winter weather. 30 minutes so the next one is free. Still feels like forever. Deanna, now I know that you were only there to watch me work. I didn't see staying on just to maintain the way that we were. Well, the ashtray is the bathtub. There's a stovetop kitchenette. Wallpaper is jaundiced. Still a step ahead. Didn't think they'd have the wherewithal to hunt me down out west. I sold half of it in Wichita. I'm wrapping up the rest. So darling, sit down on the bed. Maybe have another hit. Listen to the legend of the Amarillo Kid. Listen to the legend of the Amarillo Kid. All right, so I want to do something I wasn't planning on doing, but it feels like no one's going to mind. I wrote this little book that goes along with the record. It's called Lousy With Ghosts. It kind of expands on the world of the record. It's stories from the point of view of different characters. Sometimes not the main character, but if you like the record, and it's kind of a nice volume you can get to go deeper in. And so I wanted to read a very short story and then play one final song. And they kind of relate. And the story's called Unrehearsed. Sean Carlson and I went to Wilkins Elementary over by the river. He moved over to Annunciation for junior high and high school. I stayed public. We were friends in the way that young kids are, and that we didn't have a ton of preferences. I was friends with everyone back then. If you had a birthday party, you were supposed to invite the whole class, so maybe it was engineered that way. We'd play these massive games of street hockey on the playground there. There'd be 20 kids on each team. We used a tennis ball for the puck. It was hard to score a goal. Too much obstruction in front of the net. The score was most often 0-0 at the end of recess. This one scene with Sean I especially remember was in 3rd grade. Our teacher was Mrs. Burns, who was usually pretty okay, but it could occasionally lose it. Sean had a hard time sitting still, so he ran afoul of Mrs. Burns with some regularity. A lot of the boys in our class had a hard time sitting still. Sean was wearing this pullover jacket that had a pocket in the center over the stomach. We called them powder jackets. They were pretty popular at the time. We'd been at school for a few hours. It was probably close to lunchtime. I'm sitting a couple rows ahead of Sean, so I don't see how it starts. But Mrs. Burns turns around from the blackboard and she goes white. She's just staring at the back of the room. Something is obviously wrong. I turn around and I see Sean pulling snakes out of his pocket. Small ones, garter snakes. There's 4 or 5 of them, and he's putting them down on the desk. They're very much alive. The thing is, he's surprised too. He says, I forgot these were in here. He says he's sorry. He's actually about to cry because he knows he shouldn't have brought these snakes into the classroom. Mrs. Burns goes off. Like, not just yelling, but she gets mean. She said he's a worthless kid and he'll never amount to anything. I swear to God, that's the kind of thing she was saying. Goes on for a while. I knew it was fucked up even then. You don't say that to an 8-year-old. Sean just takes it. He never starts crying. He has the good sense to put the snakes back in the pocket of his pullover. Mrs. Burns storms out of the classroom and gets the principal. They take Sean out of class and keep him out for the rest of the day. I felt bad for him. The adults couldn't seem to understand that it was an accident. There were a lot of snakes down by the creek, and we all picked them up and played with them. I could see how it could happen. I saw Sean Carlson once in high school. It was towards the end. There was this house on Grand that used to have big parties. They'd have a few kegs running at once, one upstairs, one downstairs. They charged at the door and let in anyone who paid $5. His parties were always towards the end of the month. The people that lived there threw them to make their rent. We ended up there a lot. It would get crowded. That night, Ricky came up from the basement and said some guys had been fucking with him and he tried to get a beer. They kept skipping him with the tap, laughing, trying to get him angry. He eventually cruised and went upstairs. And when he walked away, they called him a pussy. That house on Grand attracted all kinds. We'd seen fights there before. We weren't necessarily surprised. Later on the lawn, Ricky pointed out the guys. They were just some dopey scumbags. Nothing to be scared of physically, but guys like that often have something to prove. It's best to steer clear. You don't want to be in the wrong place when some piece of shit tries to make a name for himself. Ricky went inside and I stayed outside to have another smoke. I looked over at these guys again. They were noisy and drunk, passing around a joint. They were talking amongst themselves, but loud enough that they wanted everyone else to hear too. I hate when people do that. I did my best not to catch their eye, but I started to think I knew the tall one. He was dressed like he was in House of Pain or something. Tank top under a Celtics jacket, chain, hat pulled down over his eyes. Then it hit me. This was Sean Carlson from back at Wilkins, the kid with the snakes. He turned out to be a real shithead. 4 years later, when I got back from school, I started working at this new restaurant, Sylvia's. I was trying to get a gig in advertising, but it wasn't coming quickly. I needed money. I refused to move back in with my parents. My buddy Perry was managing this place, and he hooked it up. I'd really only waited tables at one place in Madison, but Perry made it happen at Sylvia's. Not sure what he said. All the people there were restaurant veterans. They'd worked all over town. I did all right after a few shaky weeks. I started hanging out after shifts with some of my fellow wait staff. Had my sights set on this one girl, Carrie. I tried to go wherever she went after we got done for the evening. Nothing ever happened, but I made a valiant effort. One night we're at Lyle's in the booth towards the back. Carrie and this other girl were talking about their friend Sabrina. They said Sabrina's boyfriend, this guy Shamrock, had tried to rob a bank and gotten caught. It looked pretty certain he was going to prison for a while. Sabrina had a daughter with the Shamrock guy, too. These girls were talking about maybe rolling by the next day and making sure Sabrina and her daughter were okay on cash and groceries. To me, they seemed a bit blasé about the bank robbery part, but it was nice they were thinking about their friend. The next morning, I went up to Sebastian Joe's, the one on Franklin. That was my whole routine back then. I'd drink coffee and read the paper there. They had a few different newspapers on those bamboo sticks like they have at the library. I guess that kept anyone from stealing the paper. Seemed like overkill to me, but also kept the paper organized, which I liked. I'd forgotten about the conversation at Lyle's the night before until I got to the B section, front page of the Metro. There's an article about a bank robbery. Sounded like they got away with it for a few hours, but the cops found them in a hotel by the end of the day. Not exactly criminal masterminds, I guess. That's when I saw the name in the photo, Sean Carlson. The person carrying her friend we're calling Shamrock, that was Sean. Sean from Wilkins. Sean with the snakes. She met him after summer school. The Hiawatha bus stop. And a knockoff Celtics jacket. Said his crew, they call him Shamrock. His mother died when he was 5, and his dad's some sort of drug cop. But the apple sometimes rolls way down the hill. Sabrina claimed the South Side. But really, she's from Richfield. These invisible divisions never seemed like such a big deal. She's been working at this wine bar, making jokes about the mouthfeel. She sometimes takes 20s from the till. Unprovoked and unadorned, white t-shirts and cut-off shorts. Summer takes a shapeless form, after dark and powder horn. If you pull your funds together, you barely ever broke. Walking up to S8 to get smokes. In the spring they found some shambles. The South Suburban sprawl. Sabrina's taking classes. Shamrock's hanging drywall. But his fingernails keep falling off and he comes home mean and sore. And every day he hates it more and more. So the years go by and life goes on. Nothing really happens. School became a drag, so she went back to be a waitress. There isn't much to sit on the old crew comes to visit. So they all get high and pass out on the floor. Then Shamrock just stops working. Said it's such a meager pittance. Once they take the taxes out, it's barely even worth it. TV set to static. There's drums off in the distance. Their daughter's sleeping in a dresser drawer. Unprescribed and unfulfilled. Application special skills. She admits she sometimes still takes 20s from the till. Shamrock's sick of trying to smile when he's holding in the smoke. Got talking to this guy he sort of knows. Call came in this evening from the county credit union. Two guys with masks and pistols crashed in as they were closing. By the time the cruisers came around, they had grabbed the cash and scattered. But the cameras always captured all the action. So a trooper pulled him over on a vehicle description at a Hampton Inn in Hudson, about a mile into Wisconsin. When the footage ran on News at 9, she could tell that it was Shamrock. The ragged satin jacket, this is Boston. Unrehearsed and unprepared to be the only one who cares. For a daughter who keeps asking about her father. They pull their funds together. Somehow she's still broke. Walking up to Speedway to get smokes. Walking up to Speedway to get smokes. All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for coming out in the middle of the day. Thanks for the support. Really appreciate it. I think we're going to do a photo. And anything else I should say? Well, thank you for coming. Thank you.